Hey everyone, welcome back. Peace is something we all hear about. Like it's always on our minds. It's something we all think about and want. But uh
It can feel kind of out of reach.
yeah, totally. And we always hear people talking about it.
It can seem kind of abstract, right? Like world peace.
Yeah, exactly. Like what does that even mean? So we're trying to get into that today
Yeah.
with this deep dive. We're looking at this source, The Elusive Pursuit of Peace. It's really interesting. It lays out all these different facets of like why peace is so hard to achieve. And some of them are pretty surprising. I mean, I thought I had a decent grasp on this whole peace thing,
Yeah.
Like we all want it.
Right.
So like, why don't we just do it? But it turns out it's way more complicated than that.
Yeah. It's not that simple, unfortunately.
So we're going to try to unpack that a little bit today and maybe even like find some glimmers of hope along the way.
Yeah.
That's the goal. Yeah, for sure. So right off the bat, the source points out this weird contradiction. Like, everyone wants peace, right?
Mm.
But we haven't really figured out how to, like, actually make it happen.
Right. It's this constant tension between our desire for peace and the reality of conflict. It's kind of a paradox.
Yeah, totally. And, like, one of the examples that really hit me hard was the source talks about World War I soldiers.
Oh, yeah.
Who are, like, literally fighting for peace.
Right. They thought that would be the war to end all wars.
Yeah, but their actions, like, ironically set the stage for even more conflict down the road.
It's
Kind of like a cautionary tale,
Yeah.
about the dangers of seeking simple solutions to really complex problems. Like, you can't just, like, force peace on people.
Right. Exactly. And I think that's one of the key takeaways from this source piece isn't just the absence of war. It's about creating the conditions for lasting, sustainable peace. And that's a much more complex undertaking.
Yeah, for sure.
Causes of conflict, understanding the underlying issues that lead to violence in the first place.
Totally. And speaking of root causes, the source digs into this whole idea of security as being a major factor. Which makes sense, right? Like, we all want to feel safe.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Security is a fundamental human need. Everyone wants to feel safe and protected.
Yeah, but here's where it gets kind of trippy. The source argues that the pursuit of security, if it's not done carefully, can actually make peace less likely.
Yeah, it's kind of counterintuitive, right?
Yeah, like how does that even work?
Well, think about it this way. When countries are constantly trying to outdo each other militarily, building up their weapons, and fortifying their borders, it creates this atmosphere of suspicion, this fear that someone's always about to attack.
Oh yeah, like that whole arms race thing.
Exactly. And when everyone feels threatened, it actually increases the chances of conflict, even if it's unintentional. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
That's super unsettling. It's like the more you try to protect yourself.
The more vulnerable you become in a way.
That's kind of like a paradox.
It is a paradox. And the source proposes an alternative to this kind of, competitive security mindset. It suggests that we should be focusing more on cooperative security models.
Okay, so what does that mean exactly? Cooperative security.
Well, imagine if nations focus more on sharing information, working together to address common threats.
Instead of always like eyeing each other suspiciously.
Exactly. Building trust, recognizing that we're all in this together.
So it's kind of like shifting from seeing each other as like potential enemies to recognizing that we all have a shared interest in like...
In survival.
Yeah.
In global well-being.
Exactly. And the source also gets into this whole thing about beliefs playing a major role in how we approach peace.
Oh yeah, beliefs are huge. They shape our worldview, our values, how we interact with others.
It talks specifically about religion and how, like, Christianity, for example, has all these teachings about peace and love.
Right. Love thy neighbor, turn the other cheek, all that.
Yeah, but then it kind of throws a curveball and mentions how religion has also been used to justify some pretty horrific conflicts, like the Crusades, for instance.
Right. That's the thing about beliefs, right?
Mm.
They can be incredibly powerful forces for good, but they can also be twisted and distorted to justify all sorts of things.
So it's not like religion is inherently bad.
No, not at all. It's more about recognizing the different interpretations of those beliefs can have vastly different consequences.
Yeah, and like whose interpretation is considered like the right one,
Right, that's where things get tricky. And that's why the source emphasizes the importance of dialogue, understanding, and critical thinking. It's about being willing to challenge our own beliefs, to engage with people who hold different perspectives, and to recognize that there are multiple ways of seeing the world.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we've got security dilemmas, we've got the power of beliefs, and like all these other factors that the source brings up.
Right, it paints a pretty complex picture, and it starts to feel a little overwhelming.
Yeah, totally. Like, is peace even possible with all this stuff going on? And the source kind of acknowledges that, and it digs into what it sees as like the three core reasons why peace is so hard to achieve.
The three big obstacles.
Yeah. And I'm curious to hear what they are.
Well, according to the source, it comes down to education, narrow-mindedness, and maybe the most challenging of all, human nature itself.
Okay, wow. That's a lot to unpack. So let's start with education. It seems like that's got to be important, right?
Oh, absolutely. The source argues that education is key. It talks about teaching empathy, conflict resolution skills, helping people understand different cultures and perspectives.
Yeah, like if we can learn to see the world through each other's eyes, maybe we'd be less likely to, resort to violence.
Right. It's about fostering understanding and compassion, recognizing our shared humanity.
Mm.
But the source also cautions against seeing education as like a cure-all.
Yeah, like knowledge is important.
Yes, but knowledge alone isn't enough. It's about putting that knowledge into practice, transforming our attitudes and behaviors.
Totally. Okay, so we need education, but we also need to tackle this whole narrow-mindedness thing. Because, like, prejudice and intolerance seem like pretty potent fuels for conflict, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. Prejudice and intolerance create these huge divisions between people. They make it easy to dehumanize others, to see them as the enemy, which makes violence seem more justifiable.
That's a scary thought. So how do we even begin to address that? Like, how do we kind of combat those deeply ingrained biases and prejudices?
Well, the source suggests that narrow-mindedness often stems from fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of those who are different from us.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, when we don't understand something, it's easy to feel threatened by it.
Exactly. So part of the solution is exposure, creating opportunities for people to interact with those who are different from them, to break down those stereotypes and misconceptions.
Right. It's like the more we get to know each other, the less we have to be afraid of.
Exactly. It's about building relationships, fostering empathy, and recognizing our shared humanity.
Okay, so we've got education, we've got narrow-mindedness, and then there's this whole human nature thing. That seems like a really tough one to crack.
It is. The source suggests that at a fundamental level, we might be wired for conflict. There's this primal instinct for competition, for aggression.
Oh, hold on. Are you saying we're like doomed to fight forever? That's kind of bleak.
I wouldn't say doomed. The source also acknowledges that we have this incredible capacity for empathy, for cooperation, for altruism.
Okay, that's a bit more hopeful. So it's not like we're inherently bad or anything. It's more like we have this capacity for both good and bad, and it's about figuring out how to tip the scales towards the good.
Exactly. And that's where things start to feel a little less overwhelming. The source proposes this framework for thinking about peace, a way to break it down into more manageable pieces. It's about recognizing that peace isn't just this abstract concept, it's something that exists at different levels, interconnected levels.
Oh, frameworks are great. I love a good framework.
They can help us make sense of complex ideas.
Totally. So what are these different levels of peace that the source talks about?
Well, it starts with inner peace. This is about individual well-being, cultivating mindfulness, managing our own internal conflicts, finding that sense of peace within ourselves.
Okay, so basically getting our own house in order before trying to fix the whole world.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we can't create peace in the world if we haven't found it within ourselves. And that it moves to interpersonal peace. This is about building healthy relationships, learning to communicate effectively, resolving conflicts constructively.
Right, so like all those skills we need to navigate the ups and downs of our personal relationships.
Exactly. And those skills are transferable. They can help us create more peaceful communities, more peaceful workplaces, more peaceful societies as a whole. And then it moves to the community level, fostering a sense of belonging, inclusivity, justice within our local communities.
Okay, that's making more sense now. So it's like these concentric circles, right? You start with yourself, then expand outward to your relationships, your community, and ultimately...
to the world as a whole.
Right. Global peace.
Exactly.
But I'm curious, how does all this relate back to those big challenges we were talking about earlier? Like, how does inner peace help us address a global security dilemma? Or how does interpersonal peace help us navigate the complexities of, religious beliefs and their potential to fuel conflict?
Those are great questions.
Yeah.
I think that's where we'll pick up in part 2 of this deep dive.
Sounds good to me. I'm already intrigued to see how this all connects. All right, so we're back, and we're like knee deep in these levels of peace that the source is talking about.
Yeah, it's a really interesting framework, isn't it?
Yeah.
Kind of helps break down this big, complex idea into something a bit more digestible.
Yeah, for sure. But I'm still kind of stuck on how these individual levels connect back to like the global stuff,
Yeah.
like those security dilemmas and the whole belief system thing.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's all interconnected, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
So like how does focusing on inner peace like actually help prevent a war or something?
Well, think about those security dilemmas we were talking about, where countries feel like they constantly have to arm themselves to the teeth.
Yeah, always got to be one step ahead.
Right, and that kind of thinking creates this vicious cycle of mistrust and fear.
Yeah, it's like nobody actually feels safe because everyone's so worried about being attacked.
Exactly. And that's where inner peace comes in. The source suggests that when individuals cultivate a sense of inner security, like a deep sense of well-being and self-awareness, it reduces their need to project power outward.
Oh, I see. So it's like if you're not constantly feeling threatened on a personal level, you're less likely to see threats everywhere else.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that true security comes from within, from a place of inner strength and resilience.
So it's not about building walls and stockpiling weapons. It's about building up our inner defenses.
Exactly. And the source argues that this shift in mindset from external security to inner security can have a ripple effect on a larger scale.
So if more individuals embrace this idea of inner peace, could it actually impact global politics?
It's certainly possible. Imagine a world where leaders are less driven by ego and fear and more focused on cooperation and dialogue.
Okay, yeah, I can see how that would change things. Instead of posturing and threats, it would be more about finding common ground and working together to solve problems.
Exactly. And that brings us to the level of interpersonal peace.
Right, like how we interact with each other on a personal level.
Think about how many conflicts escalate because of poor communication, misunderstandings, or a lack of empathy.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like how many times have you gotten into an argument with someone just because you totally misread their intentions?
All the time. It happens to everyone. And the source emphasizes that building strong interpersonal relationships based on respect and understanding is crucial for preventing those escalations.
So those skills we develop in our personal lives, active listening, conflict resolution, even just being kind to each other.
Yeah.
Those can actually contribute to a more peaceful world.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that peace building isn't just something that happens on a global scale. It's also about the choices we make in our everyday interactions.
That's pretty cool. It's like every little act of kindness, every time we choose understanding over anger, it's like a tiny little contribution to a more peaceful world.
I love that. It's about recognizing that we all have a role to play.
And it kind of makes it feel less overwhelming, world peace might seem impossible, but if it starts with me being a little kinder to my neighbor,
Or be more patient with a difficult coworker.
yeah, suddenly it feels a lot more achievable.
Exactly. And then when we move up to the level of community peace, we see how those individual efforts can create a more supportive and resilient social fabric.
Right. The source talks about fostering a sense of belonging and inclusivity.
Which is so important for preventing those us versus them mentalities that often lead to conflict.
Yeah, when people feel valued and respected within their communities, they're less likely to be drawn to extremist ideologies or to see those who are different from them as a threat.
Exactly. It creates this buffer against those forces of division and fear. And that ties back into those deeply rooted beliefs we were talking about earlier.
Oh, yeah, the ones that can sometimes be twisted to justify violence. How does this whole community peace thing help with that?
Well, the source highlights the importance of dialogue and understanding across differences. This could involve engaging with people from different backgrounds, cultures, or belief systems, like maybe attending a community event or participating in an interfaith dialogue.
Yeah, just getting out of our comfort zones and interacting with people who see the world differently than we do.
Exactly. And the more we expose ourselves to diverse perspectives, the less likely we are to cling to rigid or intolerant viewpoints.
So basically, it's harder to demonize a whole group of people when you actually know some individuals from that group.
Exactly. It's about breaking down stereotypes, challenging our own biases, and recognizing the complexity of human experience.
And it's about creating spaces where those conversations can happen safely and respectfully, right? Where people feel comfortable sharing their perspectives, even if they're different from the mainstream.
Absolutely. And when those conversations happen within a community that values inclusivity and respect, they can create a ripple effect that extends far beyond the individuals involved.
So even something as simple as like having a conversation with someone who holds different views can be an act of peace building.
Absolutely. It's about planting those seeds of understanding, fostering empathy, and building bridges instead of walls.
And then as we reach that global level of peace, all of these individual and collective efforts start to contribute to a more stable and cooperative world.
Right. It's like this beautiful tapestry woven together by countless acts of peacemaking, big and small.
I love that analogy. So it's not just about like signing treaties or negotiating ceasefires. It's about creating the conditions for lasting peace by addressing those deeper social and cultural factors that drive conflict.
Exactly. And while it might feel like an overwhelming task, the source reminds us that even small actions can make a difference. It's about shifting our mindset from seeing peace as something that just happens to understanding that it's something we actively create.
One step at a time.
Exactly.
I like that. It's about recognizing our own agency, our ability to contribute to a more peaceful world through our thoughts, our words, and our actions.
Absolutely. And I think that brings us to a really interesting point. If peace is something we create, not just something we hope for, then maybe technology can play a more active role than we've traditionally thought.
Oh, you mean like using AI to actually build peace, not just to analyze conflict or predict wars?
That's exactly right.
Right.
And the source dives into some pretty mind-blowing ideas about how AI could be a powerful ally in our quest for a more peaceful world. But we'll save that discussion for part 3 of our deep dive.
All right, so we've talked about all these challenges to peace and all this hopeful stuff about how we can like actually build peace. But now we're getting into this whole AI thing, and I gotta be honest, I'm having some trouble wrapping my head around it. Like, can an algorithm really help us create a more peaceful world? It kind of sounds like sci-fi to me.
Yeah, I get it. It's not exactly intuitive to think of AI as like a peacemaker. I mean, we usually associate AI with like cold, hard logic, not empathy and compassion. But what if we looked at it a little differently?
Wait, how so?
What if instead of seeing AI as a replacement for human qualities, we thought of it as a way to boost those qualities? Like, what if AI could help us be more empathetic, more understanding, more compassionate?
Okay, I'm listening.
So the source actually starts by imagining this scenario where like a really advanced AI is given access to tons of data on conflict and peace building.
Like all of human history, basically.
Pretty much. And
Right.
the idea is to ask the AI, hey, you've seen all the ways humans have messed this up. What would you do differently? Like, how would you approach this whole peace thing?
That's a really cool thought experiment.
Right. And the AI comes up with some pretty interesting solutions.
Okay, like what?
Well, one of the first things it highlights is the importance of early warning systems.
Oh, yeah. The source mentioned that. Like using AI to analyze social media trends, news reports, all sorts of data to spot those early warning signs of conflict.
Exactly. Before things escalate to violence. It's like having this global, data-driven crystal ball that can help us anticipate potential problems.
That's pretty amazing when you think about it. Like we could actually prevent conflicts before they even start.
Well, that's the hope anyway.
Yeah.
And the AI doesn't stop there. It also proposes developing these AI-powered platforms for conflict resolution support.
So like if two countries are having a disagreement, they could use this AI platform to help them communicate more effectively.
Yeah. It's like having a virtual mediator that can analyze the situation, identify common ground, and suggest potential solutions.
That's interesting. So the AI isn't like telling people what to do. It's more like guiding the conversation towards a peaceful resolution.
Exactly. It's about using AI to support human diplomacy and negotiation skills.
Makes sense. And I also remember the source talking about AI's potential role in education, like teaching people empathy and conflict resolution skills.
Right. The AI envisions creating these personalized learning programs that could adapt to individual needs and cultural backgrounds.
So like everyone could have their own AI tutor that would teach them how to be a peacemaker.
Pretty much. And it wouldn't be limited to formal education either. The AI suggests using virtual reality and simulations to help people experience different cultures and perspectives firsthand.
Oh, wow, yeah. It's like walking a mile in someone else's shoes, but virtually.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And that kind of immersive experience can be incredibly powerful for fostering empathy and understanding.
I can definitely see that.
And the AI also recognizes that resources are limited. So it proposes using its analytical capabilities to optimize resource allocation for peace-building initiatives.
So like figuring out where our money and effort would be most effective.
Precisely. It's about taking a data-driven approach to peace building.
Okay, so the AI is like a peace-building consultant, helping us make smarter decisions.
Yeah.
But I gotta ask, does the AI address the potential downsides of relying too much on technology?
Yeah, good point. Because we've all seen those movies where the robots take over and it doesn't end well.
Exactly.
Well, the source actually acknowledges those risks. The AI makes it very clear that it's just a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad. It all depends on the humans who are using it.
So we still need to be careful and thoughtful about how we develop and deploy these AI systems.
Absolutely. We need ethical guidelines, we need transparency, we need human oversight.
So it's not about handing over control to the machines.
Right. It's about using AI as a partner, a collaborator in our quest for peace. And the AI actually makes a really crucial point about this. It says that even with all its data and analytical power, it can't replace the human qualities that are essential for peace building.
Which are?
Things like empathy, compassion, forgiveness, the willingness to see beyond our differences and connect on a human level.
Wow, so basically, AI can help us create the conditions for peace, but it's up to us to actually do the hard work of building those relationships and bridging those divides.
Exactly. Technology can augment our efforts, but it can't replace the human heart.
That's a really powerful message. I gotta say, I came into this whole AI thing feeling pretty skeptical, but I'm leaving with a sense of, I don't know, cautious optimism.
Yeah, me too. It's exciting to think about the possibilities, but we also need to be aware of the potential risks. And ultimately, I think this deep dive has highlighted something really important. The pursuit of peace isn't just about ending wars or resolving conflicts. It's about creating a world where those things are less likely to happen in the first place.
Yeah, it's about fostering those qualities of understanding, empathy, and cooperation that make peace possible.
And those efforts can start at any level, within ourselves, in our relationships, in our communities, and on the global stage.
Right. It's like every little act of kindness, every attempt to understand a different perspective, every effort to build bridges instead of walls, it all contributes to a more peaceful future.
Beautifully said. And I think that's a perfect note to end on. Peace isn't just a dream, it's a choice. And it's a choice we make every single day.
So let's choose peace. Let's choose understanding. Let's choose to build a world where conflict is the exception, not the rule. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and stay hopeful.
This is DigitView.